The war wasn't going badly. It had already gone worse than badly. Past the threshold of military defeat, past societal collapse, past hope, past meaning. Now it was simply ending, slowly, cruelly, quietly. On a fractured world barely holding onto a livable atmosphere, Commander Illyrin knelt in a flooded control chamber, ankle-deep in freezing water, holding a shattered datapad and breathing through blood in her lungs. "Status?" she rasped, though no one else was left alive to hear. The pad chirped once. A voice, filtered, synthetic, but failing, spoke through static. "Continental Defense Grid, offline. Remaining orbital weapons, 4% capacity. Civilian shelters, breached. Remaining population, estimate, 1.9 million. She shut it off. Her gloved hand slid across the ice-slick surface of the control station. A single shard of metal, burned black with plasma scarring, jutted from her side. She didn't feel it anymore. Not really. A light blinked on a secondary terminal. Incoming transmission, Priority Gamma Omega. She frowned. That classification hadn't been used in decades. Illyrin pulled herself to her feet, one leg dragging behind her, and limped to the panel. She recognized the code. Old, pre-war. Not Coalition Protocol. Old Union. Legacy code. She hesitated for a breath. Then opened the message. "If you are receiving this, your civilization is facing imminent collapse. There will be no help from us. We are dead. Or worse. But if you must, if there is truly no other hope, you may contact them. This is not advice. This is not permission. It is a warning." Illyrin squinted at the string of symbols embedded in the transmission, coordinates. Deep space. Outside Coalition jurisdiction. Not part of any known relay grid. Below them, one line of text, bold and crimson. Contact only if extinction is preferable to survival. Her breath hitched. Another tremor shook the tower. Somewhere below, the structural supports gave way. The entire station leaned, groaning like the bones of a dying god. Illyrin keyed in the string. A new terminal unfolded from the wall. Dusty. Locked behind 4 decommissioned security layers. Each one opened faster than the last. The final screen displayed a message history, one entry only. Last contact, 311 cycles ago. Status, unsuccessful. Survivors, 0. Recommendation, do not attempt again. Illyrin stared for a long moment. And then she touched the final button. Initializing transmission to external entity, designation, unknown. Far across the galaxy, in the void between systems. A satellite array, long abandoned, cloaked, dormant, flickered to life. Inside a glass tube chamber within a dead relay station, something ancient stirred. Not living. Not truly machine. Somewhere in between. It pulsed once with heat, then again with cognition. It read the signal. Noted its origin. Calculated probabilities. It decided. The signal bounced. Redirected. Amplified. And then finally, it reached them. Aboard the vessel Vanguard Black, traveling 0.2C through a dead system. Captain Adrian Locke sat reclined in the command chair, sipping instant coffee and listening to the slow crunch of stellar static on the long-range scanner. The humans aboard the Vanguard were many things: soldiers, explorers, fugitives. But above all, exiles. Humanity had not vanished. They had been buried. By consensus. By agreement. By interstellar decree. Over 100 years ago, the species had been officially designated. Category X threat. Engagement not advised under any circumstances. Which meant, of course, they were more alive than ever. Just hidden. Watching. Waiting. And now, someone had called them. Locke stared at the incoming signal. Eyes flicking over the embedded metadata. Encrypted. Ancient. Desperate. He knew that kind of signal. He'd sent that kind of signal once. "Parse it," he ordered. The ship's AI, Ava, responded. Origin, planet designated Neris 7. Status, pre-collapse. Hostiles, total saturation. Probability of native survival, 0.1%. Who sent it? Unknown. Military rank inferred. Likely high command. Locke leaned forward. And the message? A pause. Then Ava played it. This is Commander Illyrin of Neris Defense Command. To any who can hear this, we are lost. Our species is lost. There is no more time. We request retaliation. We request release. If you are what the archives say, if you are who we were told never to speak of, then come. Burn it all. Silence. Then Locke stood. Finished his coffee. Wake the others, he said. 1 hour later, war room. 12 officers. 40 eyes. None blinking. Lieutenant Rafik, tall and bitter, spoke first. So we just do it? No questions. They called us, said Locke. On an old emergency band no one's used in 100 cycles. They knew who we were. They reached anyway. Or it's bait, said Greer, the ops tech. A trap. Then let it be a trap, said Lieutenant Vale, the youngest. Let them learn why you don't build traps for predators. Silence. Locke looked across the room. We were given one instruction when we went dark, he said. One. He tapped the embedded steel plate on the table. A relic from Earth's final war. Do not answer. But I say this now, if a species is ready to call us, knowing what we are, then they are either doomed or already dead. He looked around the room. Either way, we owe them a visit. Aboard Neris 7. Illyrin limped through fire. The last transmission tower had collapsed behind her. She didn't run anymore. She didn't fight. There was nothing left to fight with. Around her, the sky tore open. The enemy, if it could be called that, descended in streaks of obsidian flame. They weren't a species. They were an ending. And Neris had reached its last page. Illyrin fell to her knees on a shattered promenade, her blood leaking into the cracks of dead stone. She whispered to no one. If you heard me, please, let it hurt. Above her, the sky screamed. And then, it changed. High orbit, Neris system. The Vanguard Black tore into the system without permission, without protocol, without preamble. Every satellite it passed shut down. Every signal went dark. From the ship's ventral bays, fireborne kinetic platforms deployed. Orbital descent was not gentle. It was punishment. The first wave of strikes wasn't strategic. They were statements. Atmo-penetrators plunged into key impact zones, ripping shockwaves across the enemy's land columns. EMP lances fried their aerial eyes. Flame clusters baked trenches clean. And then, only then, did the humans disembark. On the ground. Illyrin was barely conscious when the boots hit the stone around her. They were armored, blackened, scarred, silent. The figure knelt in front of her. A helmet retracted. A human face. Weathered. Clean cut. Eyes gray like dust. He held out a hand. You called, he said. She blinked through blood. You came. He nodded. We heard you. Illyrin's lips quivered. Are you really? Yes, the man said. We're the ones they warned you about. She sobbed once. Then laughed. Then passed out. Above the planet. The enemy shifted its forces. But too late. Because the call had been made. And the wrong species had answered. Smoke twisted into the sky like dying prayers. Neris 7 was still burning, but the fire had changed sides. In the southern quarter of the capital, once known as Varellan, enemy forces that had butchered cities by the hour were now in retreat, not because of superior tactics, or numbers, or even weapons. They were retreating because something had entered the field that did not belong in this war. Something primal. Human drop troopers, equipped with kinetic reactive armor and exoframes, moved through the rubble like nightmares. Silent. Coordinated. Efficient. They didn't ask for surrender. They didn't offer mercy. And they didn't stop moving once the enemy turned and ran. Illyrin woke up in a medical transport pod. The inside was Spartan, armored, and smelled faintly of oil and ash. Above her, a dark-skinned woman with short-cropped hair and a fixed expression monitored her vitals. Her uniform bore no insignia, no rank, just a name patch, Ward. Vitals stable. You're lucky, Ward said flatly. Had some shrapnel flirting with your spine. Illyrin coughed, and pain bloomed under her ribs. "You're human," she managed to whisper. Ward didn't answer right away. She tapped a few keys on the med screen, then finally said, "Unfortunately." Illyrin struggled to sit upright. "We made contact. You heard us." "We did." "And you came." "We did." Illyrin looked around, swallowing the weight of the moment. "How many of you are here?" Ward paused, then looked her dead in the eyes. "All of us." Outside the medpod, the operation had escalated. Captain Adrian Locke moved through the wreckage of Varellan's old defense grid, a detachment of 4 behind him. They were sweeping for strategic pressure points, areas where the enemy might regroup. Ava, the ship's AI, now deployed in field via a portable drone cluster, projected alongside him. "They're adapting," she said. Locke nodded. "How fast?" "Faster than expected. Your assault protocols aren't new to them. They've seen this kind of fury before." "They weren't supposed to watch it and learn," he muttered. "They were supposed to die the old-fashioned way." Ava tilted her head. "Would you like me to update fire vectors?" "No," Locke said, stepping over a broken support beam. "Let them think they're learning." He turned to the drone beside him. "Then we teach them what happens when humans get bored of patterns." Elsewhere in orbit, a Scourge fleet arrayed itself just beyond the moon of Nera 7, taking formation in silence. No warnings. No hails. No attempt at diplomacy. The Scourge didn't speak to their prey. They studied them. In one of the command vessels, a creature resembling a cross between obsidian and wet coral turned its sensory stalk toward the incoming telemetry. The humans had landed. The contagion had arrived. A comm node blinked. Tactical modeling failed. Subject: humanity. Predictive behavior: less than 30% accuracy. The Scourge Intelligence Core pulsed once, then shifted its entire processing grid to focus on a single directive. Assess how far a dead species can push back before extinction claims them too. Groundside. Illyrin, now clothed in a sterile gray jumpsuit, stepped out of the medpod into a forward operations post. It was an ugly thing, hastily deployed steel and mesh, but she could feel the discipline in its layout. No wasted angles. No exposed corridors. Minimal lines of sight. Humans didn't build for beauty. They built for survivability. "Commander," Locke greeted her as she entered the central planning tent. She blinked in surprise. "You know who I am?" Locke smiled faintly. "We looked you up while you were unconscious. Cross-referenced some war records. You held the Varellan defense grid for almost 30 hours against full enemy saturation. That's stubborn." "I ran out of things to lose," Illyrin said. "Good," Locke said. "That means you're ready to understand what we are." She stared at him. "Are you going to save us?" The smile vanished. "No," he said. "We're going to break them. If you survive that, great. If not, at least you won't die begging." Illyrin felt a chill crawl down her back. "You came because we called." "No," Locke replied. "We came because you meant it. That's different." Northern Hemisphere, ruins of Old Alicia. A human forward squad, 6 units in bone-white armor, descended from orbit at terminal velocity, breaking only meters above the surface. Enemy forces had entrenched there. Dozens of artillery drones. Biotank monstrosities. Wave after wave of autoswarm scouts. The squad hit the dirt like thunder and immediately moved. No formation. No hesitation. No warning. They didn't talk. They just executed. Within 8 minutes, the entire sector was silent. Then one of the humans keyed her comm. "Alicia's done. Not reclaimed. Not secured. Destroyed." Back at base, Illyrin stood over the central map display, watching icons representing enemy movement blink and vanish as each new human operation punched through. "These are strategic targets," she said. "Vital to the enemy's infrastructure." Locke shook his head. "No. These are the emotional targets. We're gutting them where they feel untouchable." She blinked. "You're fighting with hate?" "No," Locke said. "We're fighting like we've already died. That's what you called. Not soldiers. Not an army." He leaned closer. You called revenants. Illyrin stared at the battlefield. They're going to escalate. Of course, he said. That's what predators do when they realize the prey's staring back. In high orbit, the Scourge deployed Class 12 exothermic reaction frames, planet-scarring fire catalysts, designed to wipe out cities in minutes. Humans had 2 minutes of warning. They used 1. Ava reconfigured every forward post into a relay shield array, feeding power into the atmosphere like a second nervous system. When the Scourge beams fired, the air lit up like lightning trapped in a cage. The cities trembled, but they didn't fall. Locke stood at the edge of the defensive barrier, watching the sky burn red. Now, he said into his comm, we show them the other thing they forgot about us. What's that, sir? Asked Ward. Locke's eyes were calm. We're not scared of hell. And then humanity struck back. But not with lasers. Not with fleets. With story. They projected their history into Scourge communication lines, flooded the enemy networks with unfiltered footage of Earth's last century of war. Nuclear fire. Bio-collapse. Cities devoured by hatred, rebuilt in vengeance. And still, they endured. The Scourge recoiled. What kind of species archives its own madness as a weapon? One message repeated over the corrupted feed. You think this is chaos. This is just Tuesday for us. Later that night, Illyrin sat alone at the edge of a crater where her capital once stood. Locke sat beside her, 2 metal mugs of heated liquid between them. She took hers without a word. Sipped. Not bad. You're different from the stories, she said. I hope not, he said. The stories are the only part that's true. She looked at him. You're really not here to save us. No, he said. We're here to make them regret making you need saving. Illyrin watched the distant flashes of battle on the horizon. And for the first time in weeks, no months, she felt something strange. Something dangerous. Something human. Hope. The Scourge had underestimated the humans. Not just their weapons. Not just their violence. But the very shape of their defiance. Because while other species fought to survive, humans fought for reasons that didn't fit any algorithm. They fought for vengeance. They fought for ghosts. They fought because someone told them not to. Naris 7, Southern Expanse. The battlefield was a shattered plain now. Blackened soil, crushed stone, bodies half buried in ash. Human forces had moved through like a firestorm, methodical and relentless. Not a campaign. A purge. But the enemy wasn't running anymore. They were learning. And worse, they were adapting. Ava's voice crackled through Locke's earpiece as he and a 5-unit strike team scouted a fallen dropship site. New Scourge units detected. Genetic variance suggests field evolution. Combat style altered. Defensive posture increased. Locke crouched beside the smoldering wreckage of a burned-out walker tank, rubbing soot between gloved fingers. They're analyzing us in real time. Yes. Your methods are contagious. Predictive behavior models are collapsing. He stood slowly. So they're finally playing human. They're trying. But they're missing one thing. Which is? He smiled grimly. Purpose. Enemy frontline, Scourge forward biostructure. The Scourge were not a race in the traditional sense. They had no singular form. They were a network. A swarm of adaptive intelligences wrapped in fluid biology, capable of morphing to suit tactical needs. But now? Now they had created units designed to look like humans. Not identical, but inspired. Shoulders squared. Forward-facing eyes. Even imitation mouths. Their logic cores had determined that such mimicry might grant insight into their most unpredictable foe. It did not. Human frontline, makeshift command tent. Illyrin stormed into the tent, a charred datapad in one hand. They're copying you, she said. Locke glanced at the pad, showing a blurry image of a Scourge unit, wearing some crude imitation of body armor, even wielding a human-shaped weapon. He shrugged. Good. Let them try. You're not alarmed? I'd be alarmed if they weren't panicking enough to imitate us. They're trying to understand something they don't even have the language for. He turned to the team inside the tent, Ward, Rafik, and 2 new officers, Specialist Sue and Recon Leader Juno. They've started to pretend they understand fear, Locke said. Let's show them what it really feels like. Next phase, psychological warfare. Humans launched their next offensive, not with more firepower, but with confusion. They faked retreats. They launched phantom drop pods loaded with nothing but bones and outdated tactical manuals. They played ancient Earth music through hijacked Scourge audio relays, jarring, chaotic, emotional sound. Rafik called it the Chaos Front. It worked. The Scourge, brilliant and fast learning, were still unaccustomed to narrative. They could mimic tactics, but not intention. They copied shape, not soul. So when a squad of Scourge imposters tried to infiltrate a human field unit, disguised poorly in scorched armor and patchwork skinsuits, they were identified immediately. Not by appearance, but by posture. Juno spotted it first. They're standing like soldiers, she whispered over comms. Too perfect. Too balanced. Ours slouch. Shift. They're tired. These aren't. The imposters were executed without ceremony. One survived just long enough to crawl toward Locke. Mimicked eyes wide. Mouth twitching. What are you? Locke knelt. Held its gaze. You made the mistake of asking, he said, and snapped its neck. Scourge internal core, biocryptic processing node. The Scourge, at least the thinking part of them, recoiled from the moment. They replayed the footage again and again. This species, this virus in flesh, was impossible to categorize. Behavioral model collapse. No logic framework applicable. They could not quantify what drove the humans. Could not replicate it. Every time they copied, the humans changed. Every time they adapted, the humans escalated. It was not evolution. It was rebellion. Hours later, in a brief lull, Illyrin sat across from Ward in the command tent. Rain pounded the canvas, but neither flinched. I don't understand why you do this, Illyrin said. You don't have to be here. Neris is nothing to you. Ward stared at her. It's not about Neris. Or about the Scourge. Not really. Then what? Ward leaned forward. Because someone has to be worse than the monsters. Illyrin said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, you're not what I expected. Ward smiled, just barely. That's the point. Enemy push, the Great Rift. A Scourge armada descended across Neris's tectonic rift line, one of the last surviving bastions of underground resistance. Human intel picked it up 2 hours before impact. But instead of defending the tunnels, they collapsed them. The humans planted charges across every major support pillar, then funneled the Scourge into the maw of a gorge, using heat signatures to bait them. And when the Scourge entered, they triggered everything. The canyon buckled, groaned, and ate itself in a continental sinkhole that swallowed 500,000 enemy units. From orbit, it looked like a scar splitting the world. And over the comms, the humans transmitted only one thing. We don't fight wars. We end them. But not all scars heal. Later, Illyrin found Locke standing at the edge of the sinkhole. The wind howled. You could have saved some of them, she said. He didn't turn. Maybe. They were my people. And this was your planet. Until it wasn't. She moved to stand beside him. I should hate you, she said. I know. You're not like us. No, he said. You're like we were. She looked at him, heart breaking in her chest. What are you now? He didn't answer. Meanwhile, in Scourge High Command, a final decision was being made. This enemy is not to be assimilated. It is to be buried. Sector-wide sterilization protocols authorized. They would fire on the planet itself. Not in tactical strikes. In planet killers. The kind used only once before, during the early collapse wars. Neris would burn, and the humans with it. Because if they could not defeat the species, they would erase the idea of them. Back on the ground. Ava's voice whispered through the comms. Multiple interplanetary drives spooling. Scourge are preparing a full exothermal strike. They intend to glass the surface. Locke responded immediately. Then we evacuate. No. He looked up toward the black sky. We board them. Space is quiet. Until it isn't. Above Neris 7, the Scourge supercarriers moved into position, unfolding like flowers made of bone and fire. Their hulls were alive, organic scaffolds of biomachinery pulsing with heat and chemical rage. 3 massive exothermal warheads spooled up, each capable of sterilizing a hemisphere. And they were aiming them at a species they had already declared extinct once. But they had made a mistake. A terrible one. They forgot who they were aiming at. Vanguard Black, human flagship. Captain Adrian Locke stood on the bridge as the Scourge ships aligned. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just stared into the abyss between their ships and his, and quietly said, "They're about to open the door." Ava's voice responded in his earpiece. Calm. Cold. Boarding vectors calculated. Enemy shields are reactive, organic reflex. They'll open when they prepare to fire. Locke nodded once. Time it right, and we ride the recoil straight into their lungs. Beside him, Rafik snapped his maglocks into place. We're going in with the blast. Exactly, Locke said. If they want to burn the planet, we'll use the fire to walk through. Ward grunted. You're getting poetic in your old age. No, Locke replied. Just personal. He tapped the console. A countdown began. 3 minutes until planetary fire event. Drop doors. Engage 0G armor. Stack formation. The crew of the Vanguard Black moved in silence. Not from fear, but from habit. This was what they did. Below, Neris 7 surface. Illyrin watched the sky tremble. She stood on a command balcony, flanked by Neris survivors and human medics. The air vibrated with the charge of oncoming death. They're going to fire, she whispered. A tech beside her nodded. The atmosphere's already ionizing. Someone screamed. Then, the clouds split. But not with fire. With shadows. 12 human boarding pods streaked into the upper stratosphere, narrow, silent, fast, riding the compression wave of the Scourge's own warm-up pulse. No one on the surface understood what they were seeing. But Illyrin knew. They were going up. To stop the apocalypse before it began. Scourge supercarrier, Maul of the deep sky. The first boarding pod slammed through the side of the living ship, bursting from atmosphere into organic heat and biomechanical rot. Locke emerged first, his armor steaming, his rifle humming. Behind him, his team dropped into a corridor that pulsed like a throat. Push forward, he barked. Cut out the core before they complete ignition. Ava guided them from orbit. They have less than 2 minutes before detonation. You must sever the neural array. It's in the spine. You're currently inside the stomach. Lovely. The humans moved like wolves through a burning forest. One of the Scourge warrior beasts emerged from a side tunnel, 9 feet tall, armored with calcified ribs, its arms ending in barbed tendrils. Juno opened fire first, hollow-point sabot rounds cracking its carapace. Ward finished it with a knife to the joint behind its jaw. No hesitation. No mercy. Only forward. Simultaneously, enemy bridge cortex. The Scourge fleet intelligence entity, what might have once been called a commander, watched the incoming data feeds. Containment breached. Human vector inside primary brainstem. Time to execution compromised. They couldn't understand it. The humans should have scattered, hidden, begged. But instead they were boarding capital ships mid-firing sequence. They are not rational, the intelligence node whispered. No, came another voice, static-filled but mocking. Human signal. Live. It was Ava, hacking into the command stream from the Vanguard. They are not rational, she repeated, her voice now dripping with artificial venom, because you tried to erase them. And they remembered. Then. Check your spine. Inside the supercarrier, neural chamber. The chamber was like the inside of a skull. Pulsing nodes. Wet cables of nerve and bone. A core pulsing with unstable plasma, the ignition spark for the planet-killer warhead. Locke and Ward entered together. A towering figure rose from the central node, half machine, half mind. It opened what could have been a mouth. You are already dead. The detonation is inevitable. Locke raised his rifle. So are we. Then he tossed the gun aside and pulled the core spike. The detonation warning screamed. 5 seconds. 4 seconds. The Scourge entity lunged. But Ward was already behind it. She drove her blade into the bundle of neurons at the back of its head. 3 seconds. Juno fired at the ceiling. Explosives stuck to the inner skull like paint. 2 seconds. Locke whispered into his comm. Vanguard. Now. Confirmed, Ava said. The pod auto-hooked to the team. 1 second. The entire chamber ripped outward as emergency extraction tethers pulled them from the core. Then, blackness. Silence. Then light. Above Neris 7. The Scourge supercarrier detonated, not toward the planet, but inward, collapsing in a cascade of failing neurons and misfired fusion. A second carrier, crippled by an internal virus Ava had seeded, spun into debris. A third tried to escape orbit. It didn't make it. Human boarding parties had already planted failsafes in their plasma intestines. The sky over Neris was silent again. The humans returned to the planet like ghosts, blackened armor, scarred and smoke-drenched. Locke was the last to touch down. He removed his helmet. Illyrin was waiting. You stopped it, she said. He shook his head. No. She frowned. But the planet. We didn't stop the apocalypse, he said. We just told it to wait. Later that night, a funeral pyre burned for the fallen. Humans and Nerisians stood side by side in the ashlight. No speeches. No music. Just fire and memory. Illyrin approached Locke at the edge of the circle. You didn't have to do any of this. Locke shrugged. No. Then why? He looked at her. All we've got left is spite. She chuckled. That can't be true. Then call us again, he said. Next time someone comes to finish what the Scourge started. She nodded slowly. And you'll answer? He didn't smile. But his eyes sparked. Always. Beyond the edges of known space. The Scourge had withdrawn. But their data cores burned. They could not unsee the humans. They could not unlearn what they had become. Threat status, contained. Engagement recommendation, never. Back on Neris 7. Illyrin stood at the old tower, the one she'd sent the signal from. She stared at the stars. And whispered. We called you because we had no one left. And you came not to save us. But to remind the galaxy why they buried you in the first place. 6 weeks had passed since the Scourge fell. And still, the galaxy hadn't decided what to do with the humans. Outer Coalition Assembly, Neutral System, Sira V. They didn't meet in person anymore. Each delegate was a projection, drifting above a circular chamber of holographic light. Some flickered. Some hissed with static. A few were AI proxies for species that no longer trusted organic decision-making. But all were afraid. Of one species. Delegate Koraz of the Thalvin barked into the silence. They didn't just repel the Scourge. They erased 3 fleet cores. You call that defense? Delegate Yaun of the Zalari Confederation clicked her tendrils. The Scourge was set to glass Neris. The humans intervened only when asked. Koraz's voice sharpened. Intervened? They incinerated a world ship from inside. They rewrote enemy DNA just to humiliate them. The Klazari diplomat, transparent and slow to speak, finally murmured. That's what terrifies us. Not what they did to the Scourge. He turned. What happens when they choose a new enemy? The chamber fell into silence. A single message blinked on the central holotable. Human presence must be re-evaluated. Category X designation pending review. Neris 7, reclaimed territory. Illyrin had seen cities rebuilt before. But never like this. Humans didn't rebuild monuments. They didn't craft spires or towers. They reinforced bunkers, wired comms, drilled training yards. The idea of beauty didn't seem to factor. Just utility. She stood near the remains of Varellan's defense ring, now converted into a joint command center. Rebuilt by both her people and the humans. Ward was beside her, fitting a new armature into her prosthetic hand, lost during the boarding assault weeks ago. Yours or ours? Illyrin asked, nodding at the cybernetic limb. Ward flexed the new fingers. Mix. Yours looked better. Ours work longer. Illyrin allowed herself the faintest smile. You staying? Ward didn't answer right away. Depends, she said. Depends if you think we're worth keeping around. Illyrin turned to her. You came when we had nothing left. Ward shrugged. We didn't come for gratitude. I know. That's what scares everyone. Aboard the Vanguard Black, orbit over Neris 7. Locke stood in the main briefing room, staring at a message on the central table. It was short. Brutal. Reactivation of blacklist status imminent. Standby for full ghost protocol. United Soul Command. They weren't being thanked. They weren't being rewarded. They were being buried again. Rafik slammed a data core onto the table. After all this? After saving a planet from extinction? They're putting us back in the dark. They never wanted us visible, Locke said. But we were right. Locke looked up. Exactly. That's the problem. Elsewhere, the broadcast. The humans did it themselves. Not a plea. Not a threat. A statement. A message went out, uncoded, untranslated. Straight to the central comm channels of 43 active species, pirate factions, and fringe colonies. A recording. Adrian Locke, seated in a gray, windowless room. Eyes clear. Voice flat. You called us. You were desperate. You got what you wanted. Cut to footage. Neris in flames. Boarding pods piercing atmosphere. Scourge supercarriers burning. This is who we are. Not diplomats. Not conquerors. Consequences. Cut again. A Scourge bioform begging as Locke raises a blade. If you ever find yourself on your knees again, facing something bigger, hungrier, crueler than you. Final cut. Humans walking calmly through a war zone as it collapses behind them. You won't find angels. Locke stares into the camera. You'll find us. The galaxy reacts. Some turned away. Some tightened their borders. Some quietly began training against humans, while others, even more terrifyingly, began training like them. The galaxy had learned a lesson. And not the one it expected. Because for the first time in generations, it remembered what it meant to be afraid of something smaller. Something angry. Something that outlives extinction by choosing to become worse than the thing that tried to erase it. Back on Neris, weeks later, Illyrin stood in a half-built garden, just a patch of cleared land near a refugee dome. Locke found her there, out of uniform, for once not carrying a weapon. Strange to see you somewhere peaceful, he said. I don't know if this is peace, she replied. He stepped beside her, watching a child chase a small hand-built drone across the field. I used to think the galaxy hated you, Illyrin said. It did, Locke replied. Still does. He gave a tired smile. They can't decide if we're ghosts or warnings. You said it before. That we didn't call for heroes. No, he said. You called for monsters. She looked up at him. And now? Locke stared at the horizon. Now you decide if we stay monsters. Final debrief. Classified audio log, UNS Blackwire Network. Mission result, planetary salvation confirmed. Civilian survival, 22% of original population. Scourge fleet loss, 68% permanent. Collateral, unacceptable by standard protocol. Moral evaluation, impossible to categorize. A long pause on the recording. Recommend, do not awaken humanity again. 1 year later, unknown system, outer band. A transmission escapes a dying colony. Encrypted. Last breath of a broken world. A whisper. A name. A call. Please, if you're still out there. Aboard a black ship, hidden in the stars. The message is received. Locke reads it in silence. Behind him, his team is already prepping gear. He doesn't look back. He doesn't give orders. He just nods. Because some monsters sleep. Others wait. And humanity? Humanity remembers who called. And why they came.